This is Fountain Street Church.
I find it hard to find the best ones, but somehow, like I said, you'll hear what I'm trying to say even when the words
Here, we strive to free the mind, grow the soul, and change the world. Here, there is freedom to doubt and freedom to believe. Here, you can find a house of prayer for all people.
The swallow up Jonah.
Welcome to Fountain Street Church. Join us on the journey.
Well, it's not been a quiet week here at our little Lake Wobegon. After all the indolence of summer, we're in a hurry to get back to things, so all sorts of things are happening everywhere, and that means all of us in the office are working very fast. That means it's harder to focus. And I mention that because I found it hard to pull myself into this sermon, not because I didn't want to, but because all those other things were tugging at me to do this and to do that. I mean, did 2 weddings just yesterday, and they were 40 miles apart, which made it really interesting. But at least both football games came out on the good side yesterday, and for this I am grateful. My pastoral care load goes down appreciably when both the green and the blue win. But I always say, as I tell people, whether you hear the words or not, that as I enter this pulpit, I quote words from the same psalm that we hear quoted often from Duncan Littlefair's lips, except that these words are, "May the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be found true in thy sight, O God, my rock and my redeemer." My prayer always that I speak with integrity and honesty, that I do it with care and love, which does not mean I always succeed in any means, but it means I'm always trying. If you're an adult male, chances are in this culture that over time you end up with a collection of lapel pins. Just because you pick them up at conventions or people hand them to you. I have one that says, it looks like an equal sign. Here it is. It means the Urban League, and since I chair the Urban League, I tend to wear that one a lot. And then last spring, I had the opportunity after a conference to drive up the California Pacific Coast Highway, a better trip. There is none on the planet as far as I know. So at the end, near the Oregon border, I bought a little California One lapel. I don't wear it, but it reminds me. And then a couple of weeks ago, after I was dropping off my most recent pint of blood, I got my 2-gallon pin. So I'm proud of that, yay. But the one I wear all the time is here, and you can't read it. It's very dignified. And that's why I wear it here, because we're a dignified church, you see. And it says, Eagle Scout Dad. Last January, my youngest son completed his Eagle Scout, and we actually had the ceremony here in the chapel. I never made it. I was a very devoted scout. But I got to Life Scout, and then suddenly the hormones kind of grabbed me, and my focus disappeared at that point. If you were a boy, you remember what I mean. But what I'm remembering, and what I remembered then as my son was getting his Eagle Scout badge, is that I was a very devoted scout for a lot of years. And I really believed in it. I really meant the oath that I held up my hand at a right angle like this. And I still remember it. And I still remember the scout law, and I still believe in it. I really am a Boy Scout. I think those are good things and virtues and honorable things. And I do believe that I should, on my honor, I do my best to do. I really believe in that stuff. And back when I was a teenager, I would say it and wear the funny uniform and everything. And then on Sundays, I'd go to my youth group, which in a Unitarian church is a lot like Fountain Club here, which is to say almost countercultural. And back in the late 1960s, it was elaborately countercultural, rock and roll music and long hair and all those places. Boys didn't have it before, and clothing that was deliberately provocative and a certain promise of licentiousness if you stood in the right place. I never stood there, by the way. I was always told something exciting was going on, and somehow it never got to my part of the world, but I knew it was over there somewhere. But my point here is that I lived in 2 separate worlds, and I never thought of them as separate. On Fridays, I was a good Boy Scout, and I really meant it, and I still did. And on Sunday, I was a wild-eyed revolutionary who loved rock and roll. And I think that in some ways describes liberal religion and Fountain Street Church. My sermon title today comes from a book called The Dharma Bums by Jack Kerouac, one of the several books he wrote in his early beatnik days, and I should say in his day, which were the early beatnik or bohemian days, about another travel he took and involved exploring Buddhism and other things. But I like the notion of Dharma Bums. It's a nice title, and I wanted to work with that, and I will later on. But I would think it evokes that time, as the Allen Ginsberg poem did. There's a new book out of the letters between Ginsberg and Kerouac, some of them quite long and elaborate, evoking that time when suddenly conformism and getting along was against the rules, and whether you were a beatnik or later a hippie, whatever it was, you were pressing the cultural envelope. And I think we did that here even before I got here. Do I remember Linus Pauling came to speak here? He was somewhat disreputable then, and I think he was for a long time. If you look in the social hall, there's a mural painted along where the mezzanine is, and it dates from that period. You can see the peace sign and other things. And Timothy Leary still has a little bit of a hold on us. If not from the drug point of view, there's a little bit of us that wants to be outlandish. You know, there is a time, just this past week, in fact, when our friends at Calvin College decided they couldn't host a group called the New Pornographers. It's a music group, and their act is quite non-pornographic, what can I say? But they have a provocative name, and apparently some of the friends of Calvin College thought this would besmirch their good virtue, so they had to cancel it. And people called me up and said, "Fred, we got to get them here. That's what we do at Fountain Street Church." And I actually hesitated, not because I thought they had bad music, but I don't think that our whole mission is to stick our finger in the eye of the Christian Reformed Church. I don't think that's what we're here for. But I know we like to do outlandish things. And I think that comes from that period of the 50s and 60s when breaking the bonds of convention was important to us. So important that I think we lost touch with that other side, or have forgotten that other side that I think is there, the part that is the Boy Scout or the Girl Scout, the sense of being honorable and dutiful, which I know sounds very conformist and moralistic. But I'm going to try to recover that today, because I think one of the missing parts of liberal religion is its origins as a moral movement, not just an intellectual movement and not just an aesthetic movement. I've been preaching 3, and this is the 3rd, reminding us of our mission as a liberal church, but toward liberal religion. It's not the mission of the church. That's for you to decide. But I believe the mission of liberal religion is to free the mind, grow the soul, and change the world. And that change the world part is important, because I believe that whenever you do anything that affects another person, at least one other person, anyone ever done anything like that? Yeah, I'm sure. That constitutes a moral act, because you either do a good thing or a bad thing or a mixture of the two. And it's hard to choose the right thing sometimes. And I want to talk about how hard that is, because we have a perhaps slightly different approach than other people. And I want to talk about the goal I consider of a liberal faith is to make us morally competent, to be able to feel confident in our abilities to discern right from wrong and good from bad. Because one of the criticisms we get from the conservative religious communities is, well, you don't believe in the Bible and therefore you're immoral. Because the assumption is that the Bible contains all the moral rules, and if you don't believe in them, you're going to run off and do wild and crazy things, and perhaps from time to time you have.